Good afternoon. We continue this afternoon with portfolio questions on culture, tourism and external affairs. Unfortunately, Maurice Corrie doesn't appear to be here for question 1. Question 2 has been withdrawn, so we move to question 3. Bruce Crawford. Bruce Crawford. I'm delighted to see you, Mr. Crawford.
Cheery as usual.
Thank you.
To ask the Scottish Government how tourism in the area could benefit from the Stirling and Clackmannanshire City Region deal.
The Scottish Government is investing up to £15 million of capital investment to develop and augment key assets in culture, heritage and tourism in the region. This will support a programme of investments based around the potential for projects to grow the regional economy and deliver inclusive growth. This is a perfect opportunity to not only enhance the visitor experience, but to attract new visitors, new businesses and new investment, delivering jobs and building a reputation for strong and effective partnership.
Bruce Crawford.
No wonder I keep cheery, Presiding Officer. It's great news that £15 million of Scottish Government funding has been allocated to culture, tourism and heritage investment through this deal. Could the Cabinet Secretary please let me know what progress there's been in identifying the projects that will benefit from this funding? And does the Cabinet Secretary agree with me that a successful future for our high streets will in part be about appealing to both local and tourism markets, and that the new creative hub established by Creative Stirling in Stirling City Centre, which the Cabinet Secretary visited recently, is a great demonstration of this?
Cabinet Secretary.
Clearly, the key projects are currently being developed in partnership between the national agencies and the local business partners. And once the final deal is signed and in delivery, that will be set out. Regional partners will prioritise their projects, reflecting local priorities, and raise the standard of the provision and offer to tourists. Clearly, ensuring that our high streets are thriving and successful are a key part of what that Stirling and Clackmannanshire City Regional deal wants to set out. Indeed, I quote from their deal, they want a highly desirable place to live, work and visit, an attractive place in which to invest. I was delighted to visit Stirling. I was so impressed with the new creative hub that's there and the work of Creative Stirling's reach into the community. I think that's a very good example of sustainable, inclusive growth. And since we're on Stirling, Presiding Officer, with your indulgence, since we didn't have questions 1 and 2, with your indulgence, can I also just congratulate those that behind the Wallace Monument on reaching their 150th anniversary this year and commend their Scots Whay celebrations this weekend.
Thank you very much, Cabinet Secretary. And can I call Dean Lockhart to be followed by Claire Baker? Dean Lockhart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. As part of the Stirling Clackmannanshire City Region deal, and as a result of the hard work of my good friend Stephen Kerr MP, the UK Government has agreed to invest £10 million for the establishment of an international tartan centre in Stirling, which will showcase the unique and long history of tartan in Scotland. Does the Cabinet Secretary agree with me that this will be a significant boost for tourism and the local economy in the Stirling area?
Yeah. Cabinet Secretary.
In addition to the funding that the Scottish Government is providing on the culture, tourism and heritage investments, I'm pleased to see that the UK Government is also contributing in that area with a proposal for a tartan centre at a cost of £10 million. I'm looking forward to seeing the plans and development for that, and I'm sure anything that can help promote our history and heritage will be welcomed, and I very much look forward to seeing what plans they have for that.
And Claire Baker.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I welcome the announcement from both governments about the city deal and, as the Cabinet Secretary said, the £15 million that's specifically for culture and tourism. The Cabinet Secretary will appreciate that tourism does rely quite heavily on EU workers within Scotland, and we're going to be facing challenges in that area in future years. Can she outline what work's been done to promote tourism as a career choice, and also how we raise employment standards across the sector? I know that's an issue I've raised in terms of tourism and hospitality before.
On that latter point, we are working with the Poverty Alliance on that aspect to ensure that good working practices and indeed pay are provided. We have identified funding to help in the development of tourism as a career choice. And we are also working with the UK Government in the tourism sector deal, because that also is something that the UK Government's involved in. So we're looking at how we can work with them. On the issue of EU workers, absolutely essential. Over 11% of workers in the tourism and hospitality sector are EU citizens. They are very much welcome here. That is why we have stepped up our support on the Stay in Scotland campaign. Only this week I have spoken both to the STA and the British Hospitality Association about those very issues in relation to EU workers. We're very clear that that is going to be one of the key aspects of what happens. But the idea that you can mess around with what people's plans are for themselves and their families by flip-flopping on the date of the ending of freedom movement is disgraceful. It's absolutely disgraceful. I'm glad to see that the UK Government has now realised that that's problematic. They have set out a number of other additional immigration rules only this week, which we will look at and report to Parliament and the relevant committees once we've had an understanding of what they're proposing.
Thank you. Question number 4, Monica Lennon.
Presiding Officer, to ask the Scottish Government what action it is taking to support the freedom of the media.
Cabinet Secretary.
Free, independent and strong press is the bedrock of a well-functioning democracy. The Scottish Government is committed to doing what we can to ensure it's maintained. This includes modernising the law of defamation, as well as considering the recommendations made in the Cairn Cross review into the future sustainability of journalism and ensuring that freedom of the media remains at the heart of our considerations.
Monica Lennon.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that reply. Recently, the Scottish Prison Service and Scottish ministers raised an interdict against the Sunday Mail, which has raised issues around the freedom of the press in Scotland. Can the Cabinet Secretary advise whether Scottish ministers have the power to veto such actions? And if so, can she advise why that power was not exercised by ministers in relation to an attempt to stop the newspaper reporting details of Alan Marshall's death in custody?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, clearly, our condolences remain with the family and friends of Alan Marshall. That issue that she addresses was discussed quite extensively at First Minister's Questions, in which she attended last week. I'm aware that the Cabinet Secretary for Justice wrote to the Justice Committee on the 30th of August, and also I refer to his update of Parliament on the 3rd of September. And I would reiterate the issue at heart, which is the Scottish Prison Service acting as an employer, as any employer can do, can obviously take the action they did. But obviously, in terms of the other issues, they have been quite fully, I think, reflected in the correspondence of the Cabinet Secretary for Justice to the relevant committee.
Thank you. Question number 5, Anas Sarwar.
To ask the Scottish Government what recent representations it has received from community representatives in Scotland regarding the conflict in Kashmir.
Cabinet Secretary.
The Scottish Government has received written correspondence from 2 community organisations and 4 individuals concerned about the situation in Kashmir. In addition, ministers have met members of the community at events who have passed on their concerns.
Anas Sarwar.
Cabinet Secretary, there is huge concern amongst Scotland's Kashmiri, Pakistani and Indian community about the ongoing issue in Kashmir, particularly the drumbeat towards war. The answer to this is not violence, but rather a political solution. Will the Scottish Government make representations to all they can to ask India to reverse the revocation of Article 370 that gives special status to Jammu and Kashmir, to demand the immediate end of human rights violations, to allow the entry of humanitarian organisations, and to finally deliver the international community's promise that the people of Jammu and Kashmir would have their self-determination?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, if I can set out the Scottish Government's position, we are also seriously concerned about the current situation in Kashmir, including reports of excessive use of force, large-scale detention restrictions and restrictions on communications and freedom of movement that there was, particularly in the early stages of this. We're following developments closely, and we also support calls for the situation to remain calm. Clearly, peace and democracy is the way forward. Is for India and Pakistan to find a lasting political resolution to the situation in Kashmir, taking into account the wishes of Kashmiri people and also respecting their human rights. We do encourage the international community through the UN to support diplomatic efforts to pursue this political resolution. We also value Scotland's Indian and Pakistani communities and the important role they play in enriching our life here. And we encourage Pakistan and India to engage in dialogue and find diplomatic solutions. Scottish Government officials have been in regular contact with the Foreign and Commonwealth Office with regard to the rapid moving situation and changing situation in regards to Kashmir. And I personally wrote to Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab on this issue on the 10th of August.
Thank you. Question number 6, Jenny Mara.
to ask the Scottish Government how many meetings Visit Scotland has had with V&A Dundee and Dundee City Council over the last 3 years.
Cabinet Secretary.
The total number of meetings Visit Scotland has had with the V&A Dundee and Dundee City Council since 2016 is not recorded. However, since starting in post in April, Visit Scotland's newly appointed Regional Director covering Dundee has had 6 meetings with V&A Dundee and has had meetings with Dundee City Council quarterly.
Jenny Mara.
Okay, I thank the Minister for that answer. We recently celebrated the year anniversary of the V&A opening in Dundee, and I know the Cabinet Secretary attended. We've also seen a 14% increase in train journeys to the city since the V&A opened. My question is really how much investment from Visit Scotland and how much time is being concentrated on trying to keep as many visitors as possible in the city to appreciate the whole of our city and other attractions there that will have a beneficial effect for the city economy.
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, clearly the V&A has been a great success and I'm glad of the support of everybody who stood behind the V&A. Jenny Mara was, I think, conspicuous in being very critical of as to whether the V&A would actually be open, but I join with her in celebrating the opening of the V&A and also the year's experience to date in terms of visitor numbers, 750,000 to date. Time magazine saying it's one of the places to visit in the world in 2019. What Jenny Mara has failed to, I think, acknowledge was the launch only yesterday of the Tay Cities Region Tourism Strategy, precisely to help promote the wider Tay Cities Region deal. I'm more than happy to ask the relevant local authority areas of Dundee City, Perth and Kinross, Angus and Fife to inform the member of the details of that. Clearly Visit Scotland's role in supporting that is very, very important. And can I say that I think everyone needs to get behind that, but I'm just disappointed that Jenny Mara is not aware of significant tourism strategy launch that took place only yesterday in her region.
Rachel Hamilton.
Sir. Cabinet Secretary, in this year's programme for government, there was no mention of the Cultural Youth Experience Fund. Back in 2017, the fund was first announced and it was to offer the opportunity for primary schools to visit Scotland's theatres and museums such as the V&A and galleries. It has been promised 3 times, but it is nowhere to be found. Can I ask where this crucial funding is and why has the Scottish Government promised the Cultural Youth Experience Fund, but yet it's failed to deliver it 3 times?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, clearly that commitment still stands, but we have had very tight financial settlement budgets, not least because of the impact of the UK Government on our overall finances. We are working with relevant authorities, including Education Scotland and others, to identify what is the best way to help support that provision. What I can say is the V&A specifically, but also other galleries and museums work extremely hard in helping promote and providing access for pupils, primary school age pupils, to visit their galleries. She may not be aware, but one of the concerns of the Culture Committee in looking at this was that the access was perhaps should be concentrated on secondary 1, secondary 2 rather than primary school. So we are looking at what might be the best provision within very tight financial circumstances. We want to do it, but I will be realistic that we do have financial pressures.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. Question number 7, David Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what plans it has to protect the live music scene in Inverness in light of the anticipated closure of the Ironworks.
Cabinet Secretary. The Ironworks Music Venue Limited, which leases the Ironworks building venue, is exploring alternative locations in the interest of continuing its business. That business and the live music scene in Inverness and the Highlands and Islands is supported by Highlands and Islands Enterprise, which provides general business support as well as specialist support to the sector. The majority of specialist support for the sector is delivered through the successful Expo North support programme. This support will continue to be available to businesses which need it.
David Stewart.
Presiding Officer, the Cabinet Secretary will be well aware that the Ironworks is a phenomenal venue for the Highlands and beyond, and there's strong cultural, economic and social reasons for ensuring its survival. Over 2,000 people have already signed my online petition calling for the Ironworks survival. Will the Cabinet Secretary make specific representations to both Creative Scotland and HIE to provide help in terms of financial support, advice and guidance?
I have taken a personal interest in this and I've agreed to meet the member. I know there are a number of elected members who've been interested in the issue. He's absolutely right. This is not just about a business concern. This is about the cultural provision of live music in Inverness and the Highlands more generally. I have had conversations and discussions with Highlands and Islands Enterprise. I know my officials have also had conversations with Highlands and Islands Council. Obviously, there are issues here in relation to planning, which obviously will be resolved by Highlands and Islands Council themselves in relation to the current site. But the opportunity of either different venues or different ways to make sure that that live music provision can be established is something that we're very keen to support. So I have asked officials at High and our Scottish Government officials, and I will also liaise with Creative Scotland to ensure that we work with the owner of that individual business, but also look more widely as how we can maintain that live music provision in Inverness. There are issues about that site, as he'll be well aware, but that doesn't mean that we can't work together to come up with some kind of creative solution that ensures that concerts of the popularity, as we've seen at the Ironworks in recent years, can continue.
Thank you very much. And question 8 has not been lodged. Therefore, that concludes Culture, Tourism and External Affairs questions. Point of order, Mr Gibson.
Presiding Officer, I crave your indulgence. I came here on time in order to ask a supplementary question to one of the members, Maurice Corrie, who was first on the agenda to ask a question, but because he did not arrive in time, that question was skipped and I was unable to ask my question. I believe that if members do not actually turn up in time, it's a discourtesy not only to the wider chamber, but to people who have actually put some effort into actually preparing supplementary questions and come along on time to ask them. So I'm just wondering if you can remind the chamber that people should really turn up on time if they have questions to ask.
Thank you, Mr Gibson. Is it a different point of order? Rachel Hamilton. Let's call the microphone for Rachel Hamilton. Thank you. Rachel Hamilton.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. It's in a similar vein to Mr Gibson's point of order, Presiding Officer. The question by Claudia Beamish was withdrawn. I too had a supplementary, but I don't think that it's a situation where we can actually be fluid on this, and I then decided to change my question to suit another point where I could actually come in on that point. So I'm not sure we can be flexible, Presiding Officer. That's what I'm saying.
Thanks very much. I appreciate both points of order. In this case, I think I recognise the frustration from some members. I think in this case, Mr Gibson had a particularly regional question and there were no other opportunities to ask us such a regional-based question. It is unfortunate. Unfortunately, circumstances do affect members on an individual basis. I can notify the member, all members, that Mr Corrie did send a note of apology and an explanation of why he was late. The other two members who withdrew questions, Alison Harris withdrew her question with plenty of notice. Claudia Beamish also withdrew her question with notice. It's very unfortunate in these situations when other members have got supplementary questions, but it's unfortunately the nature of the busy lives that all MSPs lead. I would actually add one other point, which is that although the next item of business is not due to start till 10:02, it's follow-on business. And therefore, because the questions have collapsed slightly early, all the members that should have been in should be here for the opening speeches. I noticed that some of them were not. They have now arrived, and thanks to the point of order from Mr Gibson and Ms Hamilton. But I would remind all members to note follow-on business does not mean to say that it will not start early.